Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome to call number 5. Thank you for joining. Let's just dive in. I'll skip the intros because we all know each other. I could probably drop that item from the agenda. We could probably have like a separate, uh, more social call, or maybe we could move it into VR or something these days to kind of do that stuff and kind of focus on the stuff on the agenda because I think it's getting a bit longer. I'll go ahead and give you my update from the previous week. So let's see. The survey, last week I factored in the final piece of feedback I got. Jason, that was largely the stuff that you posted to the forum. So thank you again for taking the time to do that. I mean, I think we've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of people. I'm again very grateful to everyone for taking the time to take the survey. I know that it is time consuming. And I think we are now ready to share it. And I believe that Jenny said a tweet went out this morning. Jenny, is that the case? Is this thing live? Is our baby out in the world now?
Yes, your baby is out there in the world.
All
So
right.
I'm looking forward to seeing some of the responses.
Yeah. So what can we do? Should we all kind of amplify this? Should we retweet your tweet? Do you have any other suggestions on ways we can help spread the word?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to catch everyone up, what I suggested to Tulane to make sure that we're getting as much distribution as possible is just share it with your own audiences. If you have Twitter, if you have any other social media accounts that you're willing to use to share this, let's start there. We'll check in on the progress in a couple of days and see whether this kind of distribution is really effective. I know that we're trying to get to a very solid number of participants for this survey, so the more help, the better. If in a couple of days we're not seeing as many responses as we'd like to see, we can sort of pivot and come up with a new approach. But I figured this was the easiest way to distribute it at the start, and we can check in on it later.
That's great. Thank you. Do you actually have a link you could drop here for the tweet, just so those of us who are on Twitter could quickly hit the retweet button?
Yep, yeah, I'll drop that here now.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess the request to everyone is help spread the word, like Jenny suggested. We've talked about like targets. My personal goal is to get 100 responses, which I think should be achievable. And we've discussed other things we can do, like trying to pick like a random set of like investors or stacks, token holders or something like that. But I think starting with social media is a good place to start. So if anyone else has any other ideas, thank you for sharing that link, Jenny. Yeah, feel free to share them. Cool. Okay, so yeah, just finishing my own update. The next thing would be the one-on-one interviews. So I finished the 8th interview last week. I've also cleaned up the notes from most of those interviews, I think 5 of the 8, and I've shared them with the interviewees, given them a chance to review them, make sure they're comfortable with those notes being shared publicly. I still have the final 2 or 3 to clean up, and I'll get those to the interviewees this week. I think I'm going to pause at 8 because I think it's sort of a critical mass, and I think I've got a good sense, high-level sense of what a number of people are feeling. I do think that there would be value in doing more interviews in the future, so that's definitely on the table. But I'm pausing to focus more on the governance proposal stuff right now, which I'll talk about in a sec. The reason none of the notes have been shared yet is because there's still a little bit of an outstanding question, which I know I've raised before, about kind of the anonymity of the interviewees, and there's sort of one in particular was a little bit less comfortable with the notes being shared in a contiguous fashion, and so we've kind of talked about whether it might make more sense to chop up the notes and kind of post, here's a question I asked everyone, and like here is a set of the responses or something. So again, if anyone else has any thoughts on that or is interested in kind of helping with the collation there, please feel free to share your thoughts. Cool. And then, yeah, so the main thing I've been working on is the governance proposal. I mentioned this also on the last call. Brittany gave me some good preliminary feedback on it. My feeling is that it's probably about in a place where like I would feel pretty comfortable sharing it more broadly, at least with the working group for feedback. Brittany, I know there were a few points on it that you highlighted that you might want to kind of weigh in on. Maybe before we do that, just to clarify some of the stuff about PBC's perspective. So yeah, if you have any thoughts or comments on that, feel free to share them.
Yeah, I think some of it's just structural. I'd love some comments just around structural questions. So I've been working just with the, obviously setting up a new entity requires tax advice. So we're working with outside counsel on that, and then using our internal legal counsel, as well as Singaporean counsel to just advise on kind of the requirements. So all of this is still in the research phase of just ensuring that we have a correct understanding of the requirements, what things legally have to be implemented in order to set things up. So like the number of board members, the type of tax treatment, where would board meetings have to be held in order to abide by tax regulations. So there are a number of open questions that we're getting answered, or I'm working to get answered this week. So those will then impact the governance proposal, because if the requirement is like, oh, we plan to have 2 board members set up and we may need to have 3, or we need to consider that if board meetings need to take place in a certain physical country, are there restrictions to that? So I think some of that is just getting as much clarity as possible around these requirements, and then how those will impact what we need to deliver with the governance proposal. So those are some of the places that it's still a little fuzzy, but I'm having a conversation with the tax council on Friday, and that should clarify the differences between these different types of organizations. So Singapore Foundation versus US nonprofit. And those are, until we have those finalized, we won't be able to move forward with the organization.
Thanks for sharing that, Brittany. Yeah, just for a tiny bit of context. So this quote unquote governance proposal, again, we referred to it last week. It's sort of a deliverable that I promised to PBC as part of my contract with PBC. And it's sort of up to this point taken the shape of like a single monolithic proposal. So as I think I mentioned last week, it includes things like kind of broader challenges in governance of blockchain ecosystems in general. It talks about sort of high-level governance of the project and the ecosystem, but it also talks about slightly more concrete governance of the foundation. And so the piece that Brittany, of course, is referring to here is like the foundation governance piece. Now, something else that Brittany and I spoke about this week is that it might actually make sense to take this monolithic proposal and break it up into a set of proposals, one of which will be focused specifically on the foundation. And that piece, as Brittany is suggesting, I think definitely needs some more iteration. But there are other pieces of this, like for example, the sort of general set of challenges. Like that's something that 100% I think can and probably should be shared with everyone in this group right now. So that's something I'll work on this week. I think there's pieces of it that should probably be extracted and turned into, I don't know if SIP is the right format for it. Maybe we want some other set of governance proposals that are kind of non-technical. But again, if people have thoughts on that, then feel free to share your thoughts. Yeah, so that's it for my update. So my current task is continuing to iterate on this governance proposal. That's number 1. Number 2, continuing to clean up the notes from the one-on-one interviews. I don't think I have any blockers at the moment other than kind of waiting on confirmation from Brittany on some of the kind of legal, thorny, annoying things about foundation sort of legal structure, jurisdiction, tax stuff, that kind of thing. Does anyone else want to give an update or a stand-up?
Yeah, I do. Mine is more logistical regarding the working groups. I know I've probably talked to some of you about, Juliet, you and I talked about just the way that the working groups work. And I realized that every working group works a little differently, but I was trying to think of ways for each group to like easily get aligned on goals and the mission. I think that the governance group has a pretty good idea of what it's set out to do. And at the moment, its focuses are pretty distinct. You have the proposal, you've got the survey going on, and you have the foundation formation on the horizon. So it's a lot easier to figure out what the role of this group is. But I did want to drop the question of what our role will be moving forward. So for example, the proof of transfer group, I was thinking that there is actually an expiration date for that group. When Stacks 2 launches, it would probably be appropriate for that group to disband, whereas the governance group seems like a pretty ongoing effort. And considering that, I wanted to throw the question out there of, what would our role be moving forward? And simple questions like, is the way that Blockstack governs its ecosystem fair or beneficial to each of its stakeholders? So that's a question we could ask ourselves, like week over week, and we would come up with a metric to measure whether we're moving the needle on that. Just like things that would provide our group with like a very simple mental model for understanding whether we're making progress on our goals. So I don't think that that's something that we could solve today, but I wanted to put that out there and get the group thinking about it too, because I do think that the role of this group is pretty critical to the future success of governance in the Blockstack ecosystem. So if you have ideas, let me know. And even if you have ideas about smaller ways to make sure that this group and even others are working as productively and effectively as possible, feel free to DM me. Juliet and I had a really great discussion a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually, that was a week ago. It felt like a couple of weeks ago. And I've been knee deep in like working group resources, trying to figure out how to apply some of those best practices to us. But yeah, that's my stand up. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I think that that's a great thing to think about. Yeah, it's just the expiration date and the deliverables and how this group will evolve. So thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a great thing to consider. I'm probably maybe not on this call, but in the forum as well.
Yeah, seconded. Thanks for sharing those thoughts, Jenny. I think what I've seen work well in other communities is having a sort of set of resources or a template, or kind of like you could think of it as like best practices for working groups. And I think that we've done a pretty good job with some of those things here, right? Whether it's the calls or the resources or the knowledge base or kind of just some of our standard operating procedures. And so it would be nice to have some meta thought given there to kind of how to record those best practices and make these things templates, whatever you want to call them, even in a very concrete sense, even like, for example, the work that Jason's been doing, organizing our GitHub repositories, right? I don't think it'll work out of the box for every working group, but I think that, there are ideas there that could be shared with other working groups. And of course, there are ideas from other working groups that we could benefit from. So it's really exciting to know that you're thinking about this stuff. And yeah, if there's sort of a meta knowledge base, or maybe a sort of knowledge base or set of resources for like working group leads or something, that might be a cool thing to have.
Yeah, actually, the other point I wanted to mention was, so Lane, at the beginning of the call, you mentioned that you're happy to help, but to have others drive the discussion. I love the idea of having community leads as well. We kind of do it informally with the working groups, but in future, we can think about a process for having community leaders or nominating a community leader. I know, Dan, that you had nominated Juliet for that to be an observer on calls. I think that's an excellent idea, and when it's necessary, we can formulate more of a process around that, because I can absolutely see more community members taking the lead, especially on the governance group. So, at the moment we have like a great small core group of people leading this charge, but as it grows, it could get unwieldy. So coming up with a process for that, which I'm sure will also sort of be outlined in the proposal, but that's something I'm really looking forward to as well.
Cool. Yeah, me too. I think there's a little bit of an inherent tension as we move forward with governance, because I just want to highlight this. On the one hand, we have this beautiful, as you said, kind of core focus group of people. We've all, by this point, gotten to know each other and established some degree of reputation and trust among this group. And so, like, my inclination, and I'm sure other people feel this way, is like, well, you know, we don't really need to formalize things as long as it's a small group of people. We know each other, we trust each other. But like, I think the lesson from other projects and other communities that I've been a part of, at least, is that if you don't do that, then it doesn't scale, right? And you end up you fast forward a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you end up in this situation where all of a sudden it's not 6 people, it's 60 people or 600 people. And you have this kind of tyranny of structurelessness that kind of emerges. So there's a little bit of tension there. It can feel a little weird to kind of say, we need a leader, when we're all like, we don't need a leader, we all trust each other. But like, actually, maybe that's not a bad idea. So I just wanted to just be very upfront about the fact that there will be a little bit of that tension as we move forward. Cool. All right. Does anyone else want to share any updates or blockers or ask for help with anything?
So I'm working on a forum post basically on what we've been doing in the working group, some of our questions, some of the questions that have been resolved. I'm going to pass that around to pretty much everyone that's here today when I'm finished. And that's about it for me. I'm still going through academic literature, and it's been an interesting process. So I wanted to also join in on the points that Lane made about the process. I think it's a fantastic idea to put a process together and a structure together, because I foresee that this group is definitely going to grow in the future. And it won't be our cozy group of 5 or 7 that's been here in the past. So no blockers, moving forward.
Thanks, Juliet. Is there any sort of preliminary findings from your reading that you want to share now? Just because I think we probably do have a little bit of extra time today. And if not, then that's totally fine. We'll wait to read what you're writing.
On the academic end, for like looking at those articles, no preliminary findings. I have been looking at Primavera's most recent article, and I find it interesting that there are some parts in that dovetail with some of the things that Harold has been raising that are his area of interest. So some things to bring up with everyone for a conversation when I have my post ready to go.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing it. And I guess your ask is that we review it and provide feedback. So we'll be sure to do that. Okay, so if anyone else wants to do an update, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll move to the next agenda item. Cool. So I added an item here, Jason, for your issue number 10, which is about the icon. This is a tiny thing, but I mean, it might be good to just take 60 seconds now to kind of make sure everyone is aware of this. I'll go ahead and paste the link in here. And I mean, it's not insignificant in the sense that branding is important. So yeah, Jason, do you want to just quickly describe kind of what this task is and like what feedback would be helpful from other people?
Sure. So as we're starting to collect a few more resources, we have our GitHub repository, and then we have the YouTube account. There were a few places where we would like to put a consistent icon outside of the default that comes up. I would love to hear any feedback from anybody. I was playing around with the Jdenticon and just came up with a little square logo, green background, has triangles instead of dots, kind of goes with Blockstack. So that was my idea, but we're definitely open to ideas and just looking for something to kind of solidify and give us a little visual indicator on that brand.
Yeah, if nothing else, I think sort of consistency for the brand is really helpful. So at the bare minimum, we could use this icon in places like YouTube, right? We have a YouTube brand account. GitHub is the most obvious. Yeah, that kind of thing.
And I mean, I guess the other thing we could do just with the group right here real quick, is there anybody who does not like or would be against that icon, or should we just throw it up?
In case anyone missed it, I just posted a link both to the GitHub issue as well as to the proposed icon in the chat here. And I think it's transparent, right? So I think if you look at it in the GitHub issue, you'll see it with a white background. And if you just click directly on the PNG file, you'll see it with a black background.
Yeah, that's correct.
So Jason, silence means rough consensus has been achieved.
Well, I think we'll roll with it for now, and if somebody comes up with something better, we're always open.
Can you just repeat what it is about? I came in later in this call, so I think I missed a little bit. So if repeat a little bit about what this icon does or means or represents.
So the icon is just an easy visual identifier for the StacksGov organization. So at this point, we have our GitHub page, we have a YouTube, anywhere that we're looking to put a sort of similar branded or something familiar as an icon. This was just a proposal we had. And it lives in the GitHub issue, and there's a copy of the image in the chat if you want to take a look at those. We're thinking we're going to move forward with this one unless somebody has something else they want to submit, and we're always open to change.
I like it, Jason. I just took a look at it. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's great. I like that it's, that it has the parallels to the kind of PPC logo, but it's kind of a different color, slightly different shape. I was just visualizing what would two icons on my phone look like side by side. One is like maybe my Blockstack browser or my Stacks wallet or something with the first icon, and then the second one is like, I don't know, governance forum link or something.
Yeah, I think the triangles are really good. That makes it very special. And the colors stand out too.
Jason, you said that the green that you picked was sort of like, I didn't completely understand the way you described it, but it's like an RGB, what's the word, like opposite of the Blockstack blue or something? Is that the idea? Or they're complementary?
Yeah, so I use a website when I look at colors just to try and find different relationships. And this one's part of a triadic relationship. So if you made a triangle on the color wheel, you would land on, I believe it's this green, and then there's another color that spits out of it as well.
Got it. That makes sense. Cool. Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool. So we'll work on updating the various channels with it. Thank you for your feedback, everyone. The next items on the agenda are the survey and the one-on-one interview and notes and the preliminary governance proposal. I already gave my updates on all of those a moment ago. I don't have anything else to add, but I will pause and see if anyone has any questions on any of those things. I'm happy to discuss them or try to answer them.
Do you, Lane, do you anticipate that you'll be able to wrap up the discussion with one of the individuals so that the rest of us can see the notes from the interviews?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not really, it's not really up to me, kind of how and when this person responds and how they feel. And so the question maybe should be, do we just move forward and share all the other ones, right? That's certainly possible. Do we go ahead and do the kind of chopping up and just collate around particular questions and share answers to those? I don't have a strong feeling here, but I would very much like to get this data into everyone's hands so everyone can kind of begin processing it and sharing thoughts.
I think that we should at least be able to see the other ones without that. I thought that that person was still thinking about it. I didn't realize that they were not wanting to have it shared. But I think it would be good to have the rest of them, but I'd love to listen to what everyone else thinks.
I'll just chime in that I'm happy and ready to share.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I don't see a reason to postpone everything because of one person. And to be clear, this person is still thinking about it. And I strongly suspect that there's like at least a substantial portion of the interview that will get shared, even if maybe there's pieces that sort of, they feel less comfortable with, and we might kind of redact something or something like that. But I don't see a major blocker here. I think everyone else that I've shared notes with has expressed that they're okay if they get shared. So yeah, I think we can do that this week.
Great. Looking forward to it.
I think I'll drop them into GitHub as Markdown files, or just basically as raw text. If anyone, strongly feels that the format should be otherwise, like, let me know.
Hey, Lane, I don't remember seeing the results of our discussion.
Yeah, Dan, I think yours was one of the later ones I did, and I was saying I think there's like 3 or 4 that I still need to clean up and get. So yours is one of those. So don't worry, I'll get them to you ASAP. Yep. And yeah, I'll just to reiterate, nothing will be shared publicly until the interviewee in question has had a chance to review, and as I said, like, scrub out anything specific that they don't feel comfortable being shared publicly. Cool. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is an update from Brittany, if she has anything else to share on kind of all the things, but in particular the status of the plan. Well, the tongue twister. The status of the formation of the foundation.
Formation, yeah. Yeah, so I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. Some of the work that I've been doing is just around the structure of a new entity. So as we kind of talked about last week, I think the best way to proceed is to be able to be truly independent of PBC, so that it's taking into consideration, without any bias around PBC. And so getting that entity set up is important. We have done some research on the legal side of different structures and what those require, as I mentioned, and Singapore Foundation is something that is kind of highlighted and maybe being able to fit our needs. But we are having more conversations on the tax side. So from the legal side, we understand it. From the tax side, there are some open questions. For example, there may be a tax restriction that if board members are not present in person, then they are not able to vote. And if the in-person meeting takes place in a certain jurisdiction, so say it's a Singapore Foundation, but the board is all meeting in the US, there may be US tax implications because that vote gets carried out in that legal jurisdiction. So these are some of the nuanced questions that we're trying to get to the bottom of, because I think they have a big impact when we think about the responsibility of board members. If we wanted to elect a board member and we wanted their vote to count, but they were unable to travel, or they were in a jurisdiction that made it very hard to travel, then that would create additional complexity that we're hoping to avoid. So if that is the case with the, with the current proposed structure that we're looking at, that would force us to revisit whether it makes sense to have a different type of entity, or if we would need to create other legal structure around it in order to execute. So I know that's kind of vague, but some of this came in talking to other foundations and nonprofits in the space, and they've run into these problems after they incorporated. And so we're trying to learn from their legal and structural plans in order to be able to deliver on what we've set out to deliver with this independent entity, is that it can be representative, that the people who are elected into power on the board have the ability to actually vote and participate, and then the way that the community can engage in order to make decisions and to surface any concerns is also easy and seamless. So that is priority number 1. So I should have an update on the legal entity side soon. I think the next thing that Lane was discussing around the governance proposal, We've been, I took like an initial look. I've been collaborating with Lane. I know he'll have things to share with you guys soon. And with that, I think it's trying to construct like a structure in which we can get feedback that will be really valuable. I think looking at some of the other projects that exist, I've mentioned before, I've looked at Zcash. They keep coming up as the most transparent, most model governance that exists now. And their structure, they have something that I actually really like, and I would love for the group here to take a closer look. All of the Zcash Foundation information is on their website, but they have an advisory council. And the way that they do their advisory council is that any member of the community can apply to be on the council. The only qualification is like you can't violate the terms of service. So if you're like Sybil attacking, if you're being hateful, or any of the things that you would expect out of a productive community, you can be denied access to the advisory council, or you can be removed from the advisory council. But otherwise, if there's hundreds of people on the advisory council, that is allowed, and that advisory council can surface different issues. They can do voting on different issues, and they can highlight the things that they want implemented. So I really like that model because it allows the community, everyone has the option of a voice. They do not require people to use their real name. People can have pseudonyms, but they do try and have some checks on the back end just to make sure that it's like a single person and there's not like someone who has multiple fake accounts and creating multiple votes or something. But from that voting council, that allows people to surface those issues, as I said. So the power of what the entity can do is largely resides with this advisory council. The board has the ability to approve and to veto if necessary for the protection of the mission. But for the most part, they said that it's worked very seamlessly. There haven't been any vetoes. What they found is that, having a really open structure as part of the way that the foundation executes new ideas with the advisory council is great. And then having a very small, group of people who the wider community feels comfortable with in order to kind of help enact any final decisions works really well. So just wanted to surface that because I think that there's a lot of things that we can learn from that and maybe benefit, given our community is a lot of stakeholders. Like we have a lot of active stakeholders on this call in our governance working group, but I know that's not inclusive of the wider community of different miners or investors or developers or users or open source contributors. So just thinking about ways that we can actually include all of those members and so that everyone has voice. So just wanted to share some of that initial research. I would love if folks here get a chance to look through the Zcash advisory board and how it functions, because maybe we can kind of use that as a template to say, okay, here's what we like about it, here's where we have concerns, or here's where we have some questions. So I know that was a long update, so I will pause with that and allow us to either keep going on with the agenda and answer questions at the end, or address anything that's come up.
Thanks, Brittany. I just wanted to second what you were saying about Zcash Foundation being a really amazing resource. They have really made an effort to open source absolutely everything, not just to be transparent about their governance process and accountability, elections, all that kind of stuff. You could take a look at the links I just shared, but also their organizational structure and some of their legal filings and everything. It's like all in the public domain. So really fantastic resource.
Yeah, I think that having learned more about them and knowing that what we want to do, maybe one of the sort of secondary goals of this is that we can be viewed as we can help create a model in which other people would look to as well as something that's valuable and working well. So that's kind of a secondary goal, but seeing that we have a lot of people that we can learn from. I think we're at an advantage that they didn't have even a few months ago or even a year ago when there was way less information available publicly.
I think that the process sounds good with respect to the Stacks Foundation and the need to really take a deep look at the tax implications and other implications of the type of structure selected. So it's good to hear that that's something that's really deeply being looked at. If there's any other issues that come up with respect to the structure and how that will impact governance in any way going forward, it would be great to hear about that when you have more um, understanding of what the structure is really going to be, other than the general foundation concept.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm happy to share. So my call with Deloitte is Friday at 5 p.m. So I probably, I'll have some more information. Hopefully I can share based on that call or as a fast follow-up from them after that. But I will share as soon as I have it. And part of my not sharing more to date is because I think that there's if it is indeed true that there is a lot of complexity here, then we may have to go to the back to the drawing board and kind of throw out some of the existing, hypothetical structure that we had in place. So, yeah, trying to give you like more things you can dig into versus kind of being distracted by things that may not be relevant.
Thank you, Brittany. We look forward to hearing the outcome of that next call and hope that tax stuff is never simple, but hope that it's not as complicated as it might be. It doesn't present too much of an obstacle. Does anyone else have any other updates they want to share, or I guess questions they want to ask about any of these topics? Cool. I guess today's call may be a little bit shorter, which I think is okay. A couple things are still on the agenda here from the last call. I know we didn't have much time to discuss them because we kind of ran over time last time, so I'll just quickly bring them up again. The first one was, again, a proposal that Jason had put forward to extend the length of this call to 90 minutes. I think we did achieve rough consensus on the last call. I think we kind of agreed that for now we'll keep the call length officially to 60 minutes, but we may have kind of optional or extended time topics for people who do want to and are able to stay longer. And in fact, I did add one of those to this call. That was a topic that Harold had proposed in the working group channel about, well, I think anyone who's been part of that channel is familiar with some of the topics that he's passionate about, so I won't attempt to describe them. But unfortunately, he's not on the call today, so I think they'll have to wait for next week. Did anyone else want to share any other thoughts about this call schedule, about the length of the call, the frequency, any of those things? Or Jason, did you want to add anything on this topic?
Just from my end, that I'm in agreement. I think that keeping it to a 60-minute agenda with some extra breakout time is good. That way we really consider people's time for the important part, but then we have some extra time to talk if we need it. And yeah, otherwise nothing else to add.
And just to be clear, that did happen last week. I think I had to run, but I believe, Jason, you and some other people were able to stick around. I think Brittany came back as well. Did that go okay?
Yeah, I think that went really well. We were able to dig a little more into concepts, and it's nice when you're in a flow, when you have something really hot that you want to keep talking about. It's cool to have that option to break out and keep talking about it.
Yeah, I agree with Jason as well. It was a definite good option to be able to have that sort of secondary call after the main call. And I also agree on the 60-minute structure. So.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it's working pretty well, so we'll stick with that. So I will end this call in just a moment by kind of offering to hand the host to someone else if anyone wants to stick around and kind of keep discussing any of these things, and we can keep doing that. And then I'm just reiterating something here I think I may have mentioned before. before we even started this call today formally, before we started recording, and that was just, again, reiterating that no individual person, including myself, should be thought of as a single point of failure or as a, quote unquote, bottleneck in any of these governance processes and procedures, right? That includes moderating GitHub. It includes kind of the maintaining, the repositories, merging pull requests, as well as, of course, hosting this call, and everything else, right? So, as I said before, it's kind of an open call for participation. So if anyone would be interested in hosting the next call or hosting one of these calls in the future, which of course just means getting the agenda updated, reminding people ahead of time on Discord that the call is happening, and then just kind of moderating the call itself, or helping moderate the GitHub as well, as Jason has begun helping out with. Just ping me. You could speak up now. You could send me a direct message on Discord, and I'm more than happy to add you to the organization on GitHub to coordinate so that you could host a future call, etc. And that's just, there's a couple reasons for that, right? Again, as we discussed before, one is anti-fragility, so to speak, right? If I or someone else is not available on a given week, then governance should not be put on hold that week. And also there's an accountability issue as well. I think that, having things in multiple hands is generally a good thing.
So I'm happy to request stepping up for being a moderator on occasion. Don't want to say it every time. And being able to assist on the agenda and all of that on GitHub.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Send me your GitHub handle, your GitHub user ID, so I can add that. And yeah, I think trading off makes sense, right? Because we can, it is sort of a lot of work for one person to do every week, but if we take turns and we do every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, it's much less of a burden.
Sounds good.
I'm happy to help moderate one of these days too.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. Okay, I think that's all I have on the agenda. Does anyone else have anything else they want to discuss, or does anyone else feel that they want to stick around and just kind of turn it into a social chat like everyone's been doing recently on Zoom because we can't meet in person? Okay, I'm sure we all have lives to get back to. Thank you, everyone, for your time. See everyone back on all the channels, and looking forward to seeing everyone back here next week as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.